Hello everyone, and welcome to this next video discussion in the RICS Tech Partner Series. My name is Andrew Knight. I'm the Global Data and Tech Lead here at RICS, and I sit within the part of the organisation that looks at standards, regulation and thought leadership, and in my particular case looks at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. Now, with over 130,000 members worldwide, working right across the full property cycle, looking at infrastructure, looking at residential, looking at commercial, looking at land, it's a hugely broad area of practice, and therefore the impact of data and technology is similarly broad and profound in its impact. And today I'm really happy to have Stephen Berridge join me from Intval. So Stephen, do join me on the discussion.
Andrew, good morning.
Good morning to you. Now, I always like to kick these off, despite the fact that we're arguably talking about data and technology. I always like to sort of frame the first question as a bit of a kind of an origin story in terms of the firm and the background of you and your colleagues. So it'd be great to hear about your kind of backstory in the sector and an idea about how Intval came into being.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My name's Steve Berridge. I'm a chartered QS by trade. I started my career some 14 years ago at Davis Langdon, now AECOM. I'm now a director at London-based cost consultancy Fidgins. During the past, I think it's 14 years or so, I've been fortunate to work on hundreds of schemes in various sectors, and I've seen sort of firsthand innovations in prop tech, contech, ERP, document management, a lot of the sort of the individual processes that we do in our day-to-day jobs, but have always struggled with, the lag for post-contract cost management, the way that PQSs and contractors manage post-contract variations, still a very manual process, still both sides bouncing an Excel sheet back and forward. And someone told me once that if you've got more than one party trying to use the same Excel sheet, that's not going to work long term, and that needs to be innovated, and we can do better. And that's kind of the background, really. I'm based in Bristol, but working in London. And we set up Intval in, I think, end of 2020 with a co-founder, Darren, who's the technical side of the business.
All right, so it's that I say classic in the good sense, that mix of kind of technical and domain expertise for the sector itself, because I think in my experience that's a great combination, because there's always a danger that you get, dare I say, technical people building things because they can without that full domain knowledge of the problem they're actually trying to solve.
Absolutely. I think the best pain points are personal pain points, and it's one that I've carried, the businesses that I've worked at have carried indefinitely. So no, worth looking into.
Indeed. Now, in terms of the problems you're solving, I mean, you've alluded to that whole area of post-contract work and, compensation events, variations. For our audience, could you perhaps bring that alive? Because perhaps to put it diplomatically, it can be quite a source of friction, can't it? And quite a problem for the industry in terms of resolving those inevitable changes that happen post-contract once you begin to build assets.
I think inevitable is a very key word. I think, on any job, inevitably there are going to be post-contract variations, and it's one of those things that we've always done it a certain way as an industry, and that some organizations are better than others, and some have their internal documents and templates predominantly Excel based that do the job, but there are a lot of issues related to that and the way that they work that could be made better. The biggie is it's a very manual process and a very repetitive process. You could have anything from 1 to 1,000 variations on a project. The thought of managing those by sending emails back and forward, by attaching substantiation, marked up drawings, invoices between two parties, inevitably losing those emails over time, or perhaps those individuals move on from that business. The narrative, the conversation, and the way in which variations have been agreed, particularly historical ones, if it's a long duration project, is fundamental. The security around how variations are agreed is also quite important. I think, particularly for the bigger schemes, and maybe the public and government funded sort of stuff. Currently an agreement it's a verbal agreement, and we've got an Excel sheet on both sides of the table, and we might mark a cell as green and put the word agreed next to it. If we're being really careful, we might put the date it was agreed. But fundamentally, it's an open document. It's not secure. It is open for abuse, possibly, But likewise, just over time, Excel sheets do break, especially the larger ones when you start to add in multiple sheets. So having a secure merchant of record that both parties can rely upon in months or years to come, it feels like a no-brainer, if that makes sense. It's something that we should be doing, but we're not, and that's what we try to look at. I think there's a couple of other things that we did a big piece of research before going down this road, spoke to our peers on both the client side, but more importantly on the contractor side. And other things that came to light were, the biggies were substantiation, having to find it and having to send it, but often having to resend it when client-side surveyors, ended up mislaying emails for whatever reason, which is a huge time burden for contractors. A bigger one is from a contractor director level in a contractor organization, having junior commercial managers report into them and perhaps reporting over optimistically about how they viewed their rolling final account, what was agreed or what was agreed. They can say they've spoken to the PQS and in principle everything's agreed, but quite often that that comes not the case when you move to the back end of a project. And from a contractor business, post-contract variations is the lifeblood of what they do. So ensuring that what and what is not agreed and for what amount of money is crucial. And then the last one, which I think is becoming more and more pertinent, is the data and the analytics side of post-contract activities. I think yes, Excel can be convenient. Everybody knows how to use it. You can whip up a spreadsheet relatively quickly, but the issue that comes with that is A, collaboration. It's just not right. It's not the right tool for the job. And B, harnessing the data that's in that Excel, in that worksheet, being able to pull out insight, aggregate information in an autonomous way, display it to give you and your business insight that you wouldn't otherwise have. Again, that's something that information is currently lost unless you take the time to manually print, extract, and aggregate that information yourself. So, and I think that's a biggie for us. We're at the very early stages of it, but I think as more and more people get on board with data analytics and insight, everyone else is going to have to follow suit, because that's going to be their competitive edge, I think, moving forward.
Indeed. A couple of questions come to my mind as a result of what you've just said there, one of which I guess is giving us a brief overview of what Intval does from a technology point of view to solve this problem, and then even perhaps more interesting is that piece around the data and the fact that actually once you begin to structure that data, dare I say, outside of Excel in a way that's protected and able to be analysed, what that kind of potential is around that data insight. But I guess that first thing is just sort of the basics. Well, how are you using technology to overcome, dare I say, that problem of overuse of Excel, which is common right across the sector, I think?
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely. I'm just going to try and share my screen if I can.
Right, yeah. There we go.
You should be able to see our homepage now.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Intval is we've gone around the houses on how to best describe Intval, and it's a difficult one because the contractor is the person paying for the software. It's their software, but it provides significant benefit to both sides of the table. Both parties get, in my view, almost equal benefit. But it's a cloud-based solution for commercial managers at main contractors to digitally meet client-side PQSs to agree the cost of project variations. And the biggie is that it's not just we're coming in and clicking on a number. We're trying to store the conversation, the narrative, the supporting information and breakdown all in one place. So it's the merchant of record. It's the place that any party can go to check on what is agreed and when it was agreed. It's accessible from any computer, mobile device by clicking sign in, and everyone obviously gets their own secure login. And I'll just very briefly give you just a quick look at what it looks like.
Yeah.
So it's your live rolling final account for a construction project. You've got your contract sums, your rolling final account, and your breakdown of your variations. And we're about to add in some decent graphs and charts in here. The lifeblood of the software is essentially it's a changelog. And as I say, what we do isn't overly complicated. We are just innovating on current processes that do work, but can be better. So we don't require, or users don't require any training because it really is that intuitive. But you've got a live changelog, the contractor's responsibility to keep this up to date as best they can, contractor columns, assessor columns, which in this case would probably be a PQS. The key is that the conversation and the narrative is stored around the variation, and this is a two-way conversation chat. any substantiation or breakdown, invoices, anything that the contractor needs to substantiate his variation is put in here. The costs are then budget, firm total. When an agreement is reached, it's agreed, and that agreement is locked and secured. And that's fundamentally what we do in its simplistic form. And the feedback is it's great. There's lots of ways we want to grow this and avenues we want to explore, but at its core, this is its prime functionality and what people love and are using it for today.
As you said, and that was my second question, was almost by doing this, you've now opened up this potential piece around data insight. Where do you see that kind of heading over time once this data has all been collected to manage the process better? As you say, you've now opened up a positive avenue for looking at data and perhaps looking at trends, for example.
It's key. I think from our perspective, so we securely track everything that happens within this app. The reason being is all the clicks that a contractor would do or a PQS would do, when budgets are added, how often they're added. It allows the user to, with some technical know-how, and if not, we can help you do that, to essentially interrogate your own cost data. So if you are running 1,000 projects through Intval, or 1,000 post-contract projects through Intval, you will have the ability to come in and SQL query your project-wide data or company-wide data to the extent of it's how creative can you be? It's that level of detail that we're storing. So for our projects with contract sums between 5 and 10 million, what is the typical contingency spend? Or on projects where a particular commercial manager is running these jobs, how quickly after variations are added are they agreed? And as a percentage basis, what's the firm cost, agreed cost versus the initial budget that he put in? So there's the scope of querying data is almost endless, depending upon your imagination, I suppose. And it's about having that ability to pull that data out. So we're talking to a couple of the larger cost consultancies that are big into data, and they love this. They love the Excel piece, they love the change log, but for them it's the data aspect that they get very excited about. When as a business you're running thousands of projects through it, the trends that you can see and it comes back to competitive advantage. At the end of the day, a lot of your peers in the industry won't be using this, won't have this ability, won't have this tool, won't have this resource. And over time, it allows you to provide better advice to your clients, giving you that competitive edge. So back to your original point, I think it's a huge part of what we're doing, and will end up being up there in terms of our key offering, I think.
And as you said, there are benefits of, I hate using the phrase both sides in this kind of conversation when you're talking about these kind of issues, but it really is benefiting both sides of the fence, isn't it, in terms of the PQS on the client side and then the contractors QS as well, which I think is an important point. Where's it going in terms of early adopters, in terms of people who are beginning to see it? You obviously mentioned some of the big cost consultancies, and also linked to that is, I'm assuming it's kind of contract type agnostic. It doesn't care whether it's JCT, the various flavors, or FIDIC or NEC3 or NEC4, so it's agnostic in that sense, isn't it?
It is absolutely agnostic. We joke. We could use this to log in and agree the price of an apple. It's more about human behaviour. It's about the way that two parties meet, engage, discuss, and work through a process to agree the cost of something. So to the point, it is agnostic. The way we like to say this is this helps keep change moving. Currently the trend is that you might agree to meet a cost consultant every week to agree a block of change, which is great. And it's always kind of been that way. However, during that week, and it might be longer than a week, especially over the last couple of years with things that have gone on, there's a huge chunk of risk that you're carrying as a contractor in terms of change on your books because you haven't agreed it. But likewise on the client side, if a client's looking at me and asking for where are we, I have my views on where the account is, but it's still not agreed. This app, Intval, allows parties to log in asynchronously when they have the time to come in, to substantiate, to put notes, to put conversation against items, to flag change, which informs the other party that certain things have happened. So it keeps change moving in the background. In terms of adoption and early adoption, I think we're quite lucky in the sense of a lot of work has already been done by kind of prop tech software pioneers to kind of help educate the industry, about the need to innovate and how better things can be if you do so. And there's certain software providers I remember coming to market 5, 6, 7 years ago that everybody hated, but over time, they've learned to adopt them and have realised the benefit. So I think for us, that difficulty, that education piece, has already been done by others, which is great, and that's luck for us more than anything else. Following on from that, I think the pain points that we are addressing, most people, if not all people, know that they exist and feel them almost on a daily basis. I think there's a small educational piece because I think you get stuck in your ways of doing things in a certain way, and you almost don't. You need to take a step back and realize that these pain points exist, but once they've been identified, you can't get away from them. So on that basis, the conversations that we're having, it's very quickly into a, yeah, you're right, I can't believe we're doing it this way. It becomes a, we need to do it this way because I've now seen the light of how more efficient it can be. And look, we've been very fortunate. We've attracted some great blue chip customers, ISG, Mace. We're now talking to Gleeds. It's exciting, to be honest, because the nice thing is that we're an early stage business and we rely on feedback from users, and that's already becoming apparent. This is version 3 now, and it's changing so quickly with every could it do this or could it do that? I'd really like it if it could do this, and assuming these are sensible suggestions, and they are, and even if the people that we're using are in different sectors within the industry, it comes back to that agnostic approach. It works, and it's so it's going okay.
So where if you put if you get your crystal ball out, where do you see the future of the platform in that kind of short, medium, long term?
Good question. I think that in the short term, we're a small but growing team, and we want to ensure that we're onboarding the right customers in the early stages. What we don't want is 1,000 one-person organizations joining the platform, because for us, we'll struggle to support those. We're actually focusing, we're doing it the other way, top down. We're starting with the much larger contractors, but less of them, which allows us, our engineers and our success teams to really focus on engaging with them on a one-to-one basis. So if let's just say, for example, ISG come, they're on the platform, every project that gets set up has a PQS. We jump on that initial call just for 5 minutes to speak to both sides, to explain the benefit, because what we don't want is PQSs being presented with this and going, what is it? I don't want to use it. It's not for me. When in actual fact, with a couple of minutes of explanation, you realize actually it definitely is for you, and there's a huge amount of benefit you can take from this. So it's quite time intensive from our part to ensure that we do that, but that's crucial because that gives us the live feedback loop that we need to ensure that the platform evolves organically but correctly to suit the needs of our customers. I think we are predominantly we are solely UK focused, and certainly will be for the foreseeable future. And that really is again because we don't need to grow quickly. We did raise some investment at the start of 2021. But our investment partner isn't a large VC fund. We don't have to return 10 times the return within X number of years, which allows us to grow a sustainable business, work with our customers, ensure that in 4, 5, 6, 7 years time, this has evolved into a key solution for both sides of the industry, really. Globally, possibly. Never say never. My gut feel is that might happen, but not for a long time. We are already talking to Procore and working on an integration with Procore. So in the not too distant future, you'll be able to access Intval from within Procore, and along with the integrations that happens. Now, obviously, Procore are global, so that does open up that avenue. But again, I think we as a business need to decide how quickly we grow, and that will depend upon our level of resource internally. We're a very hands-on business with our customers, so we can't have too many too quickly. Sorry, Andrew, go on.
No, I was going to say no. I mean, which almost leads me on to that sort of observation that because you are so hands-on, and I think it's quite a nice contrast to perhaps people's perception that technology is by definition remote, and that actually it's a case of, well, you just buy a license to something and you have to crack on with it, whereas you're taking a very different approach, which is actually saying, okay, let's work with the customers very closely in those early days, particularly to get them onboarded, to use the phrase. So in that sense, obviously, presumably in the medium to long term, you could see a situation where as you gain momentum and more users, then smaller practices, smaller contractors will be able to get on board. But your focus is very much getting people on board and making sure they get that value in the short term and really understand the platform, rather than going, as you say, for broke, if I can use that expression.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think it's more of a case of, yes, in many years to come, it may become a more autonomous platform in terms of onboarding, but that's only when we're confident that what we're offering is exactly what that customer needs. And we can't say that yet because we're far too early in the process, and anyone that does would be lying. It's a case of what we don't want to do is run ahead and build a load of features for what we think the contractor customers and the PQSs want to see on the platform, because we'd be wrong. Well, I'd have a good idea on the PQS front, but we would like live feedback, and we do. And part of the app is there's a feedback feature request chunk in the top right, and it's about that live. A couple of things have come in recently. Somebody wanted flagging added, which is a great idea, because the issue is that a contractor will come in, spend an hour in the platform, make a lot of changes to a lot of the variations, save it, come away, but the other half didn't know that happened.
Yeah.
So there's a flagging feature now whereby you can flag a change, the other side is notified, and it encourages this to and fro, this conversation to keep moving in the background. And it seems small, it seems obvious, but until you get that feedback, it's not.
No, I suppose it's yet again an example of why it's so important to have that feedback loop with the market, because if you sit in a darkened room, metaphorically building stuff, you end up building the wrong stuff, or you just miss out on opportunities that the market would tell you just by giving you that very verbatim feedback. Well, and I suppose, is it also worth commenting that from a technology point of view, I'm presuming this is cloud-based, it's app-based, so when it does reach the point where it can become perhaps more a kind of a remote offering, that it is very accessible for firms of any size, because you're simply saying, here's a web link, here's an app, and it's on the cloud. So from that point of view, there isn't a big overload or overhead, as it were, for perhaps smaller contractors to use this kind of platform.
Absolutely, it's completely cloud-based. So we're run on AWS, and the document storage features are provided through Box, so very secure. In fact, if you consider how current practice works with an Excel sheet that's sent around emails, very unsecured. On that basis, it's a very secure solution, and accessible. It's very quick to get up and running. Every individual gets their own unique login, and you can get in from any device. So it's interestingly, the feedback we had recently is that, especially during COVID, contractor and PQS were jumping on a Teams call together whilst both having the app open. And they found that really interesting. I found that really interesting, because that's not how I envisaged that it would be used. But they did. It meant that they both knew that they were looking at the same information at the same time. It didn't involve, I sent you an email last Tuesday, can you open that? It was live. They could converse in the app to secure and log any of the key conversation points, and agree that way. So again, it was, we're learning constantly, and that's quite exciting. So it's we've got a long way ahead of us, but
no, I suppose that's a positive indication of the kind of resilience of the process to the pandemic, where people have said, well, actually, we need to do this. We've got an extra tool now. Let's just have that in a Zoom or a Teams window. And I suppose it's a good indication of people still collaborating through some very difficult times.
Exactly that.
Good. Well, it's been fascinating to hear about your journey so far, Stephen, and I look forward to catching up again in a few months to see how it's going and see what the market's telling you and what new features you've built in. But for the moment, thanks for your time today. It's been fascinating, and I look forward to catching up with you very soon.
No, that's great. Good to meet. Thanks, Andrew.